Okay, you're now live. Woo, woo, woo. I think I'm also a few minutes after noon, so a little past it. Apologies for that. I am going to just do a thing here. Blah, blah, blah. There we go while we get kind of set up. Hi, friends. Got some folks coming in. Love it, love it. Yes, here we are. I don't see any little eyes on Facebook, but as we all know, Facebook, who knows what Facebook is doing, right? Who knows? Maybe Facebook isn't even recording. It's entirely possible. This happens with Facebook. If you're on Facebook and you're seeing me right now, feel free to leave a comment. Or not. It's fine. Either way. It's fine. Oh, I see an eye on Facebook. I see an eye. Excellent. So, friends, we are here on Friday. Feel like I made it. Hi, Sarah. Okay, great. It's working. Love it. So we are here on another Friday, another set of office hours, and another set of fun times for us to kind of have a little bit of another time to have a little bit of a think through, a little bit of a chat. My name is Dr. Shannon Coates, as you likely know, and I am coming to you live from a place that is north of Toronto, and I'm pulling up my, let's see, yes. And I want to acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendake Neonwencio peoples. And I saw a really beautiful, I'm going to repost it soon actually, I saw a really beautiful outline recently of the thoughts and ways to consider a land acknowledgement, and how to form a land acknowledgement, and how to be thoughtful around land acknowledgements. So I am going to post that soon. It was wonderful. So very thoughtful, and conversation kind of starting, and something that I think we, especially those of us who are in North America, those of us who are in Australia, New Zealand, so those of us who are in North America right now, in Canada especially right now, where we are working through some, these are not discoveries. I mean, I think I've said this a few times already. These are not discoveries. We are confirming that there are, that the children who went to residential schools, native residential schools, so many of them died, and were not acknowledged, and that parents were, and communities were devastated, and the physical evidence of that is there and is being found. The physical evidence is being found. We've had the knowledge of this for a very long time, and so now more than ever, especially for those of us in Canada, I'm going to speak most strongly for those of us in Canada, now more than ever, let's do some work to understand the land that we are privileged to live and work on, and the original peoples of the land. This went in a little different direction than I was anticipating there, and I'm getting a little weepy, but that's okay. We can go that direction, but that isn't really where I wanted to go this today, or not necessarily where I wanted to go, but so today's sort of top of mind for me is I'm doing a voice ped practicum right now with 6 voice teachers. Yes, there are 6 voice teachers in the voice ped practicum, the current one. And the voice ped practicum that I'm doing right now talks through or is a follow-up kind of a practicum. It doesn't have a specific subject, so it's more about teaching understanding processes. And so the 3 weeks are built on the first week we talk about breathing and alignment and strategies around teaching and understanding breathing and alignment. And then the second week we talk more specifically about phonation and strategies around understanding what's happening at the glottis and how that affects, flow phonation and how that affects the tonal outcomes and strategies to change the way that we work when we're thinking about what's happening at the glottis. And then in the third week, we talk a little bit about, well, certainly specifically about vocal tract shaping, but also putting those 3 things together. So what we're sort of thinking now about as registration. So how do all of these things kind of fit together to create the tonal outcomes we're looking for? Or that we're hoping to accomplish. And so that's the kind of nuts and bolts, the fundamentals that we are talking about in the voice ped practicum. And on top of that, along with that, I always want to incorporate teaching fundamentals. Good morning, Dr. Nelson. I always want to incorporate teaching fundamentals. So as I've said many times before, and as you have likely heard me say before and posted about before, it's one thing to know the fundamentals. It's one thing to understand the anatomy and physiology and how things work together. It's one thing to have those tools and know those systems. And it's not a bad thing, of course. And then it's quite another to actually be able to teach these well, right? And to have the teaching strategies. So that's fundamental to everything that I do and how I like to work, is not just working with like understanding what's happening and diagnosing and all that stuff, but also having a very, putting a priority on understanding how we learn and how we teach, how to teach better. So, and practical tips and tools about how to teach better, right? So one of the discussions that we had last night, the direction it went in a whole bunch of just beautiful directions where we were talking about certain strategies and teaching strategies. Beautiful. My little heart sings. But one of the directions that we went was in talking about how do we have this kind of parallel, especially when we're working with music theater singers and Western classical singers, right? So especially when we're working in those styles and with those kinds of singing, how do we create a culture in the studio where the technical part, the learning how to do the thing, does not overshadow the learning how to be an artist? So how do we, and the learning to discover what our voice is, voice with a capital V, the learning to discover what we want to say and who we are and how we want to say it. So how can we, in our zeal and in our enthusiasm to be wonderful educators and to work with singers, to be able to have the technical skills, to be able to, to create these coordinations and to know these coordinations and to learn these motor skills, to be able to create the tonal outcomes that we're looking for, especially in our Western classical music theater styles, to create those tonal outcomes. How can we work in such a way that our students are getting that information and are able to, go through the process of learning these coordinations and these technical skills, and at the same time are prioritizing, like that doesn't become the priority, right? That the that learning to be an artist and learning to communicate and understanding how to use the voice to communicate, how can we make sure that that's the priority, right? How can we make sure that that part of the education doesn't get lost in our teaching and in our zeal to educate around the tonal outcomes and how to create the tonal outcomes we're looking for? And when we're teaching popular musics, it's really is a different kind of focus, right? In our popular musics, the tonal outcome is the sort of the like it's it serves the communication, right? So communication, artistry, what I want to say, that comes first, and then our tonal outcomes serve that. Whereas in Western classical music, especially, and to a certain degree in our music theater singing, we need to be able to accomplish specific tonal outcomes. That is the nature of that kind of singing and performing. We need to be able to accomplish certain tonal outcomes, but then so often the artistry is like way down the list on the things that we're teaching, So we've got like, okay, learn to read music, musicianship skills, ear training, understanding like, registration balancing, tonal colors, blah, 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 like languages in Western classical music. Like we've got all of these, and understanding, classical era versus romantic era, bel canto, blah, 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 like Baroque, like understanding all of these different eras and the kinds of styles and tonal outcomes and ways to create authentic sounding German in the romantic era, for example, right? So how all of those things kind of often can get prioritized, and then we end up having singers where the artistry is really left behind, or can be left behind. So it's a challenge, and it's a challenge for independent voice teachers in a way. It's also a challenge, obviously, in our academic systems, but it's a challenge for independent voice teachers in a way, because we're starting very much from the beginning with singers. We're starting very much at this sort of, we're meeting these singers when they're young, when they're just starting out, and when they're just starting to figure out even what they like. What do they even like? And they're just starting to figure out what they even have to say. Like, who are they as humans? What do they have to say as humans? What do they want to say to this world? What do they want to contribute in their lives? So this is this can be a real challenge for us as independent teachers, especially to have this dual work where we're encouraging those technical skills, as well as making sure that they're working through, how am I an artist? And what do I have to say? What's my voice with a capital V all about? So that was some of the discussion that we had last night, and I wanted to just throw out a couple of ideas that we were coming up with, and a couple of the things that were kind of bubbling up, and I'm sure we will have in the practicum. We'll have ongoing, thank you, Wendy, yes, we'll have ongoing discussion around this in the practicum, certainly. And I mean, as we were discussing this, there were a couple of the voice teachers, in fact, probably the majority of them, who were like, okay, so who am I as a teacher, right? Like, what am I even teaching? What am I even supposed to be teaching right now? Like, just tell me, who am I as an educator? How do I do this? Like, what do I do? Which is valid, and I think beautiful. We're kind of disrupting the traditional sort of top-down educational style that I certainly came through in my singing and in my training. We're kind of starting to disrupt that, especially in the independent studio, which I love. So some of the ideas that we were throwing around were and I should say too that all of these ideas come back to something that I've certainly kind of blathered on about a little bit already in previous lives, but they all kind of come back to two things. One, student-led learning, so understanding what that student is there and finding ways to allow the student to be the teacher in the studio, right? Allow the student to be the expert in the room in certain ways in the studio, and allowing for this culture where we're on this journey together, and allowing for that kind of culture. And then the other one that came up so strongly was redefining success goals, right? Redefining goals around success, and redefining what does success mean in the voice studio. So so often success means that I sing well at the recital, or I do well in Canada especially, and I know in England and Australia, we have a conservatory system, so or we have a long-term ingrained conservatory system. So I do well on my exams, in my conservatory exams. I prepare for those and I do well on those, or I do well on the auditions for my musicals or local theaters or blah blah blah, or I get into the choir, or so there are these sort of parameters for success that are very sort of product driven, right? So product driven parameters for success. So starting to really working intentionally to redefine in the studio, as well as in our culture, in our studio culture with the students that we're working with, redefining those parameters of success so that they mean more, so that those parameters are more along the lines of, how is your process working? What is the progress? How can we assess your process, rather than making the success parameter or making the goal for success a final product, which, in this world, certainly there is that. But there is a case to be made for the tonal outcome not necessarily being the goal, and not being, and the performance not necessarily being the success parameter. There is a case to be made for the progress and the process being the success parameter. How well do I embrace the process? How well do I embrace, and how easily can I, easily might be the wrong word, how can I find am I able to embrace the process, maybe is a better way to put it. So there's a case to be made for process and progress as the parameter of success, as the goal, as opposed to that final outcome of a performance, or getting an exam done, or singing at a festival, or the recital, or all of those things that we so often associate with the goal of learning, of taking voice lessons, right? The goal is to do this thing. So some of the ways that we were talking about kind of changing those parameters, certainly using more growth-oriented language in the studio, and cultivating this the growth mindset, if you will, in the studio, cultivating a sense of fun and exploration and discovery in the studio, as opposed to a roadmap, and we're only successful when we get to the X marks the spot. But there's so much fun and discovery and experience to be had as we get through the map, right? So as we go through this path, we don't have to stay on this direct path. We've got all of these other options to explore. Cultivating this fun and discovery and experience based learning environment in the studio. So those were some of the ideas and some of the things that we were discussing, like I said, in the practicum yesterday in our group discussion. So I kind of wanted to just throw a few of those ideas out there, and I'd love to know your thoughts around what are some of the ways that you have discovered that are where you are successfully rethinking and successfully changing culture in the independent studio, especially around how do we embrace student-led learning? How do we embrace creating a culture of progress and process versus product? How do we encourage concepts around, so I got distracted by my kid walking up and down the stairs. It's all good. How do we embrace concepts or encourage concepts around developing artistry and developing the voice, capital V, while we are also doing this work to develop the technical skills, right? So how do we develop artists? How do we work toward artistic development and understanding and giving agency to an artist in a voice studio, especially when we're working in the sort of more restrictive styles, if you will, such as Western classical singing or music theater singing. So if you've got some great ideas around how you're doing that and how you've been able to encourage that kind of culture in the studio, I would love to hear them. Yes, I would love to hear them. All right, that's what I'm going to leave you with today on this kind of rainy Friday. Not even kind of rainy. It is definitely a rainy Friday here in Ontario, in my part of Ontario. I won't speak for all of Ontario. Ontario is huge, y'all. Ontario is larger than Texas. I just thought I'd throw that out there. Texas is big. Ontario's larger than Texas. Now, Ontario also has like a tenth of the population. We're not a super populated province compared to many of the states. But yes, it's big. It's a big place. So I will speak from my part of Ontario, where I am, which is in southern Ontario. It's rainy here today and not so warm. But you know what's great about rainy days? I don't have to water my plants or gardens. So that's good for me. I don't have to water the plants. I don't have to water the gardens. I like that. Have a terrific weekend. Have a terrific weekend. Have a terrific rest of your day today. Have a terrific weekend. And we'll talk on Monday. Take care. I'm just trying to figure out how to turn off the live. Here we go. Boop. There we go. I ended that on Instagram. Let's finish on Facebook.